Dice are rolling, darkness falls. Inside the GM Studios halls. Tabletop games where nightmares creep. In a realm where sanity is lost and weak. Welcome to the abyss where dreams shatter. Inside the GM studio, nothing else matters. Blood and chaos, the dark arts unfold. In the realm of role-playing, where legends are told.
Hey out there, welcome to Old Guy Rap Session about being old and cantankerous Midwestern assholes. By which I mean, of course, naturally, if you can't decode that, welcome to Inside the GM Studio side quest episode where we field questions from the internet. I am your host, David.
I'm drunk.
Yeah, and I am drunk. That's Matt. He's drunk sometimes. So what happens is because sometimes we're too drunk to select questions on our own, what we do is we leave it up to the fates. We leave it up to the fates, and I have this D20 that I have had for, how long have I had this set of dice, Matt?
Very long time. That gray one?
Yeah, it's only the second set of dice. Remember I first had the black and red flecked set of dice.
It was black, red, and white. And then that one came along later, which was probably about 1998?
Somewhere in there, but let's see what it do. What does it do? I got a 15 this week, which is a respectable 15. Without even a modifier to my level 4 homosexual barbarian.
So this one is going to come from... hold on. I need to make sure that we haven't done this one. Like I said, I'm a little drunk. Okay, here we go. This one comes from Final Isopod on our RPG with the title... Best advice you had for fluent narration without pauses. So I have been a MG pretty much forever, and I have been recording my AP for some 3 years now. MG.
What? No, back up.
I'm guessing
MG,
I'm guessing what they meant to say was GM, and they just got the M and G back switched. And then I've been recording my AP actual play.
Actual play.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
For some 3 years now. I never really acknowledged this, but I feel my narration isn't fluid enough, and I consistently pause my thoughts with the moment. I'm also guilty for starting sentences after pauses with, okay, so I feel attacked right now. I already read a lot of good advice. The best so far is simply to use silence instead of filling noise, short and focused sentences to end sentences with a full stop instead of constantly trying to prolong the thought. But I wanted to hear if you had any advice that really helped you drop the ums. Dude, this question is built for David. Because ever since we started this podcast, this is everything that David has tried to cut out of his own DMing.
Yeah, it really is just a matter of speaking slowly and not feeling the pressure of the need to finish your thought. I noticed that I have a tendency to start a lot of sentences with "you see."
Mm-hmm.
You
or
see
if you
X,
recall.
Y, if you recall, it's, and once people point it out, you kind of go, okay, I should not do that. I don't know that I've been that great about that. If you recall, I usually start the session with "if you recall,"
right,
and then I kind of get into it. But if we're half an hour into the session, I probably shouldn't be using that device. The short answer is that if you just slow down and give yourself permission to not speak at a rapid fire rate and punctuate sentences, bookending thoughts, then those ideas will come to mind a little more naturally. And there's this pressure that you feel one feels. I don't know how this speaker feels, but I have felt to kind of fill noise or to fill silence rather with vacuous things to say, and frankly, that leaves you rambling, and it's never any good. A buddy of mine, Andy, who runs games, I played with him a couple times, and I chided him a little bit because he starts so many sentences with all of a sudden, all of a sudden, all of a sudden, all of a sudden. Everything is all of a sudden. Let's just
Mm-hmm.
ignore the fact that you could just say suddenly, right? It's like, but dude, everything can't be suddenly or all of a
Yeah.
sudden, right? But when you speak more slowly and kind of think about each sentence that you're putting forth, then you have more of a wrangle on what your thoughts are and what it is that you're navigating toward. I mean, playing on a VTT over the internet, sometimes that takes such long pauses between thoughts that my
Mm.
players will think that my audio and video cut
Yeah.
out. Like, are you there? Like,
It's
no,
true. We've done it.
I'm just taking a moment to ensure that I'm not stammering or repeating myself. Uh, I don't know. What do you do, Matt, to you've gotten better over the years,
The
and
the
I'm
only reason I've
wondering, like,
yeah, the only reason I've gotten better is because we've talked about it together. I think we talked about it before we even started the show,
hmm
about
hmm
slowing the fuck down. Stop trying to just fill in silence with something to keep the players engaged, and take time to think about what you're saying. Uh, because otherwise, and you know what? Ums aren't bad. They're not terrible. It's fine
no.
if you got a couple of ums in there, but if you are going to stick to that crutch, because we had another episode in our main show of crutches that we use. Um, what is mine? I had a oh fuck. What is it, David? You know what it is. What is my crutch that I always go to? I know that I
Um,
when there's pauses between players, it's always so. What do you want to do? That is always what I start with. But I know I
you're a
have another
big
one.
fan. You're a big fan of starting things with contingent clauses, and for those that are not grammar nerds, a contingent clause looks something like this. As the party walks into the room, you notice X.
Yeah, yeah.
As you think about what it is that your character, what is important to your character, you Y. As the group enters into the castle, B happens.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Matt's a big fan of the as you
Huge,
X
huge fan.
B. It's and there's nothing wrong with it. I just when you start too many sentences with that, the as you whatever, and it's a good instinct because as much as it can be a little tired and trite,
Mm.
the instinct in it is to kind of keep things in the active voice, to keep things in the present here and now. It's not saying you did this and then this happens because you did this as past tense. That's not happening in the here and now, right? So the instinct is to kind of keep it in the here and now. And so you're saying as X happens, Y2 happens so that
Mm.
everything is kind of dynamic. But when you lean too much on that, just like when I say you see, we're so reliant on GMs as discussing things the players see. And you don't really ever need to say what the players see. As you see a crumbling castle ahead of you, okay, a crumbling castle stands before you,
Yeah. See, I was
period.
gonna say that uh, flavorful narration can go a long way with just like David just stated, putting it in a different spot of the sentence. But before you lies, blah blah blah. Uh,
hmm
I find is a little bit of that flower language that people know about. that makes it sound just a little bit more grand than it actually is, instead of just saying, as you walk into this, you see blah blah blah, which is a bit boring.
It's just it gets to be too much of a formula. Like terse, stark, short sentences. So
Mm,
I would say when you slow down when you speak, you have a tendency to speak in shorter sentences. The reason that that's valuable is it makes it easier for people to follow along with what it is that you're saying. If what you're saying is not super convoluted, then the players should be engaged with it, especially if you're using somewhat vivid language. But don't mistake talking a lot for talking substantively, is the advice I guess I would give on
mm.
that point.
Let's get to some comments down here, just because I love this username. Fridge underscore OV underscore Doom, Fridge of Doom. I just like how he spelled of OV. We had a rhetoric coach come into work once, and one thing he repeatedly said was, quote, people generally talk 10 to 20% too fast, end quote. Deliberately,
Hmm.
deliberately slowing my speaking down has drastically reduced my ums and uhs. Also, it helps, quote, pad the runtime, end quote, if you feel you don't have enough content. Also, it gives you room to speed up against if the situation calls for it without becoming incomprehensible. I like that.
The,
Because when I thought about that, my speaking, when I get really excited, or especially when I can't exactly think of something to say, like right now, as you can probably hear, my speaking becomes really rapid. And it's the same thing in games because I improvise a lot. So I start spouting stuff as fast as I can to try to fill the air, as if we were in radio, fill airtime as much as I can
mhm.
until I can put the point out there. So 10 to 20% too fast, I think that's a great thing. Bring it down 10%. Try to do that. See what you can do to just slow it down a little bit.
20% is probably closer.
Mm,
If you're somebody that is inclined to run games, you're probably someone that is also inclined to think like a writer and think like a storyteller. And storytellers' minds often run fast. And if you run fast, then your mouth likely runs faster than your mind does. That's not good. You need to take a pause and slow down. And I've noticed that my players, the more deliberately I speak, the more they hang on what it is that that I'm saying. That maybe I'm not giving them as much exposition or speaking as quickly, but the faster you speak and the more you inundate them with lots of verbiage, especially if it's not deliberate verbiage, the easier it is for them it just to become static. But when you're speaking deliberately and slowly with each sentence, with each word, because you're being thoughtful about what it is you're saying, I've gotten good response from my players where they seem to hang on what it is that I'm communicating. And there's also another phenomenon that might be unique to me. I don't know.
mm,
But the more I exercise the ability to kind of speak thoughtfully and deliberately, sometimes I can and will get in the zone where I'm speaking deliberately and thoughtfully, and it just compounds. I kind of felt myself being in this zone last night where it was like I was trying to slow down with my descriptions, with all of that. And it almost just compounded where it was like I kind of just got off on a roll and it made it much easier for me to spiral the narrative up without adding in superfluous and bankrupt phrases and words that were just kind of nonsense. Every sentence I spoke like builded or built on the last sentence, and I was kind of felt like it was a rising tide. And then once I had a sense that the wave had crested, so to speak, I just let that wave crest and I made space for the players. But that amped me up, and I was like kind of in this mode where I was in storyteller mode. I made space for the players. I was prepared one way or another if they grabbed the reins and they ran the other direction with it or ran some direction with it. But if they didn't, then I was fine to kind of like pick it up because I was like energized by how good each of my descriptions was. I didn't, I felt like there was like not a lot of fat on the session that we played, in particular last night, even though I was narrating a lot of it and there wasn't a lot
Mm.
of like character involvement and stuff.
I like this comment here that I'm seeing because later on down the line, what they're talking about is at a gaming table. Uh, and what they say here, specifically over Zoom or on a VTT, they find it much like a business meeting, where if you pause, then somebody immediately tries to bump in to get their point across before somebody else can. And then Ed the Smokebeard uh, brought in. I find that in business, if you pause for a breath or even just for cadence, others in the discussion immediately pounce in. It's like being polite in traffic. It only works if others are too. So your group has to work together well if you want to actually make your voice heard. Uh, I do think that yes, it works a lot better, especially if you're playing over Discord like we do, or if you play over Zoom. Uh, your table needs to know each other quite well. I think we've gotten to that point now that we, like David and I and our game group, we know each other well enough that we know when we stop talking, when it is a good time to pop up. Because I can count on one hand, really, maybe one hand and three fingers, how many times we've talked over each other for the game.
Yeah, I gotta say that I don't really experience that. Um, if you're a GM that's thoughtful about crafting a narrative and you've got some sort of intrigue, small pauses and hiccups in your description aren't an issue. I generally have to actively throw the ball to my players because I'll get off on some sort of description and my players generally seem to respect that. And they go like, "Okay, I'm listening now. I'm taking in the narrative," and they're not super eager to jump in until I signify to them in some way that it is their turn to speak. I acknowledge that there is probably plenty of GMs that suffer from this, but I would say that you need to dial in your rhetorical strategies
Mm,
because a small pause here or there shouldn't invite someone to interrupt you. It should, and often does, invite anticipation if what it is that you're saying is interesting to the group. Um, but players, I wouldn't assume malintent on the part of the players. It means they're excited to engage with the narrative. So you shouldn't take it as some sort of slight. You could kind of, okay, well, they're excited to kind of jump in here and I'm going to let them do that. But then kind of go back to the drawing board about like what elements am I doing from an expositional standpoint or from a storyteller standpoint that are communicating to the players that it is their turn to speak. Uh, Perhaps my background in debate and rhetoric informs this, but there is
mm,
kind of like a ping pong match of rhetoric that goes on when it's like someone hits the ball across the table to you and then they return the serve and then you bunk back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And there establishes a pretty good cadence to that. That takes a lot of time in and a lot of knowledge of the people involved in your game, and it's really hard to do if you're not doing it in person. I mean, much has been said about like the value of playing in person. but I really do believe that it is much easier to kind of establish that dynamic in person. And when you're on a VTT, especially if you don't have video on, it's just voice.
Mm.
It's so easy to kind of begin talking over one another. My
Mm-hmm.
players talk over one another more than they talk over me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably just something that needs to be hashed out over a long arc. But um, yeah, so
There's one comment here that I'm not gonna say their just in case. I'm not gonna say their username. Don't go at them. Uh, but their comment is there's a description that is likely if there's a description that is likely to come up and you can plan it in advance, write it down as part of a session prep. Then read it back verbatim when it becomes relevant. I find that not only does that help me speak more fluidly, it also leads to me using more interesting and descriptive vocabulary. This I don't agree with. This is fine if you have flavor text for a room or for an event, but me as a person, as a GM, I rely on creating on the spot. Like, you can't just always hope to write some shit down that is going to come up later on and that you're going to be able to just read off of a page. A good GM should know improv. A good GM should know how to just create something off the cuff. And this new, this is no good. I don't like that. That is not a good thing.
I am probably inclined to agree with you like 85%.
Mm.
I guess I would ask you this. Is it clear to you when you play in my games when I have written descriptor text?
Yes, because I
Right.
know you. I know you. I know your body. I know you.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Let's take it easy. Um, so it's probably pretty clear when I've written descriptor text.
Mm.
But the danger of descriptor text is it comes off often like robotic. And then you enter a room and there is like a kind of
See,
labra
that's
on
what I
the
was going to
wall.
say is that David has a reader's cadence. Just like whenever I read our community questions or I read an email, you can hear. I'm sure David realizes when I'm reading something, the way that I'm speaking. David has a reader's cadence that I can just pick out. But of course, I've been listening to David's reader's cadence for damn near 30 some odd years
20,
now. So yeah,
25, 28 years. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
for a very long time.
so yeah, and so it's probably pretty clear when I'm reading something, but
Mm.
hopefully I would hope that it doesn't seem mechanical.
No.
That it's just clear, like, okay, we're doing exposition, and I'm gonna kind of give you a little bit of exposition, and I wanted to make sure that the language is kind of buttoned up, and then it was a good descriptor to set the scene.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the caution of writing too much. If you need to write a little bit to set the scene, I would suggest that that's probably at the beginning or the end of a session, or maybe up to a paragraph when you're introducing a new character, a new location, a new plot point. But don't go on too much about it. It's fine to go on at the beginning or the end of the session for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 paragraphs about description because that's more narrative focused. The meat of an adventure should be action focused,
Mm-hmm.
and the useful the utility, let's say the utility of writing lots of flavor text for beginning and ends of sentences, I'm not as critical of it as Matt might be because here's the reason. If you do that a lot, if you're writing flavor text for the beginning or the end of a session where it might be a little more expositional, what that does is it trains you to think in evocative, creative, action oriented, dynamic verbiage. And so the more you write those things that bookend a session, the more it will hopefully train you a little bit to come up with more creative and dynamic stuff on the fly, which
Mm.
I believe is what Matt's point was. But
Yes.
you need some sort of like exercises that allow you to do that, and to expect somebody that doesn't write a lot and doesn't really touch the D&D game or touch the idea of flavor text to come up with evocative, dynamic, interesting flavor text on the fly might be a little too much for people that aren't into writing or into storytelling.
Mm.
And so those sitting down with those flavor texts and writing them when it's appropriate for your campaign. I'm with Matt. They need to kind of slot in an appropriate moment, but when you can do it, if you can do it, it will likely make you better at coming up with it on the fly, which I suspect is a more valuable tool than the actual flavor text serves in any given scene, because the better you get at it, the more you'll be incorporating it into your battle scenes, into your other role playing scenes where there might be moments of high dramatic tension, and you'll just start thinking in terms of things that are phrasing things in a way that's interesting, dynamic, that has dramatic stakes, that
Mm-hmm.
has evocative language. And so I'm not fully in your camp that it's not necessarily a good thing to do, but it just it has its place, and that place is likely bookending a session in some way.
All right, hold on. I'm gonna get my final thoughts pose here. All right,
Sure.
here's my final thoughts. When you want the scenes to seem dramatic, or if you want them to seem exciting, or any of that, you begin to speak very quickly because you want it to come out like daggers towards everybody,
Hmm.
and just shoot these words towards them that makes them think, oh, fuck, there's a whole bunch of shit going on. God damn, this is exciting. But what you're really doing is, if you're not thinking about what you're saying, is you could just be confusing them. You're throwing a bunch of words out there that sound good, but it's just confusing because it's all nonsense is what you're really saying. So take your time, speak what you want, and you can be dramatic by holding off, thinking about it for a second, and then perhaps, just like I'm saying right now, there won't be very many or uhs or repetitives of as you see, or when you walk in here again this happens, blah blah blah. Take your time, it's fine, it's a game. Taking your time actually brings the drama up, it brings up everything, it heightens things, that's what I meant to say. And when you take your time, things become heightened, as long as you're able to continuously bring up the high points of what you're trying to say. uh the peaks of all the players are going to continue to stay heightened. And those are my final words. How about you, David? You want to bring us to an end here?
Yeah, I you said something that I thought was fairly poignant and insightful. If you're giving description and you're kind of like presenting information to the players, you want it to be like daggers thrown at the players.
Mm-hmm.
And that's accurate, but don't mistake quantity for quality.
Yes.
Daggers are particularly useful because they're sharp, and they're digging. So more purposeful language and more purposeful descriptions are going to hit harder than just a Gatling gun, an
Mm.
aggregate amount of verbiage thrown at the players.
Yeah, hitting them
Try
with a
to
point is better than hitting them with a blunt end.
Exactly. That's a very good way to put it. So when you slow down, you
See that shit?
allow
I took my time and I thought about what I was gonna say, and that's what I said, and it came out pretty fucking good, huh?
when you take your time with what you're saying, you're ostensibly sharpening the dagger of each word, of each sentence, of each idea. And when you sharpen it to a razor point, it's going to hit harder, even if there aren't as many points that you're making. The players will walk away with a sense of biting commentary and resonant plot points. Uh, so there's no need to inundate them with excess information. Try to hit them with the information that hits hard and hits importantly, and you'll be better positioned to have your plots, your characters, plot twists, traumatic points in your story hit harder without needing to talk excessively.
All right. Well, I think that's going to bring this episode to a close. So I think we're just going to leave it with a hold up. Good night.
And good luck.
All right. Good episode.
Here's looking at the whiskey burps.
Oh, yeah. We're